I don't want to waste your time, so there won't be an intro. This video is supposed to shed a bit of light onto what is going on behind the scenes of a Pro League team. So I'm mainly trying to explain exactly what coaches and analysts are responsible for. For that, I'll first build a framework that helps define and structure the different things that need to be done in a team. Then I'll talk about how these responsibilities are usually split up. And at the end, I'm going to make a case for how they should be split up. As a disclaimer, obviously, all of the terms that I'll be using aren't exactly well defined, because, well, defining those is kind of the whole point of the video. So there really isn't right or wrong in this context. I'm just trying to make a logically sound case for the way that I think about it. In general, the responsibilities of staff work can be split into 5 different categories, I think. We've got management, improvement, innovation, preparation, and statistics. Management is kind of easy to define. For an esports team, there are a lot of different people that you regularly need to talk to. Tournament organizers like ESL, game developers, so in this case Ubisoft, the org that is paying your salary, and of course other teams to schedule scrims with, for example. And this is just day-to-day operations. The real work starts when you need to travel abroad to play in a tournament. Now the team needs flights, accommodation, and possibly visa. Usually the tournament organizer takes care of these directly, but even then you obviously still need someone to coordinate with the team itself. So I'd say that the keyword for this whole section is communication. That's what it's all about. Next thing is what I call improvement. Like the name suggests, this is about improving the team, and that can happen on multiple levels. We have the mental level, the individual level, or the strategical level. The mental side can be about improving the team's communication, their emotional attitude, or maybe even their general philosophy on how to play the game correctly. On an individual level, we concern ourselves with the general playstyle of our players, so for example, are they playing too aggressively or maybe not aggressively enough? But it also concerns the really specific parts of Rainbow, where we would think about whether player X is playing position Y correctly or something like that. The last level, and probably the most important one, is the strategical aspect, and it makes sense to subdivide it into macro and micro strategy. The macro part is about how you approach a map in general. Which operators do you pick, how much map control do you want to take, do you want to go for a plant, and so on. The micro part is about the nitty-gritty of Rainbow. For example, what's the best way of playing out a 3v3 situation on a constant lobby attack? Do you go for plant? Do you focus on lobby? These are the kind of questions that would fall into this category. And because they are pretty specific, answering those correctly will only increase your win rate by a few %. But I think that this small margin is often exactly what makes the difference on a Pro League level. Everything in this section pretty much happens during scrims or scrim review, because that's when you can see what isn't working correctly right when it happens. To summarize, this section is about improving the team on a mental, individual, and strategical level, but mainly focused on existing strategies. The reason I think that this distinction is important is because coming up with new stuff to improve the team is such an important aspect that it deserves its own section, which I call innovation. Especially in Siege, just the sheer number of things you could theoretically do at any given point in a round is absolutely massive, and this means that the game is in a constant state of change. And I'm not even talking about how Ubisoft forces change every 3 months when they release new operators. I'm also talking about the month-to-month meta changes that could screw up your existing strats. Take for example a bank basement defense. The meta right now is to heavily contest server stairs with a shotgun op. And you could be the best server stairs player in the world, but if the meta shifts and attackers start to go for garage and vault takes, it doesn't matter how well you play server stairs, and you can spend ages improving your server hold without it having an impact on your win rate. At this point, you just need to innovate and come up with a new strat that is based on how the attackers are currently playing the bomb site. And it's not just your opponents who change. If you make a simple change to the operators you bring, existing strats might not work out as well as it did before. So you need to continuously adapt in order to deal with all of that. So like the improvement section, this section is also about getting better as a team, but it's through innovation rather than by making the existing strats better. Next thing on the list is preparation, and this is my personal favorite. Preparation refers to watching your opponent's games and understanding not only their general playstyle, but also their specific strategies so that you can devise a game plan that will increase your team's chances of success. On a broad level, this could be telling your team to play more passive than usual because you have seen that this particular team tends to stall out if they don't get any early picks. But it also covers the really intricate stuff. For example, if you notice that on a border customs hold, the defenders only reinforce 2 walls towards passport, and they always have CC reinforced. This could be an opportunity to come up with a side rush strat. Nowadays though, this kind of preparation isn't as strong anymore because a lot of the top teams are playing a very loose style where they are playing off of opportunities that they see in-game instead of according to pre-planned strats. And obviously, you can only come up with counter strats if your opponents are consistently playing the strat that you're trying to counter. So nowadays, you're usually just playing your default strats with maybe a few minor adaptations here and there, like where to throw velcams or how aggressively you should be looking for flanks. But there are still a few teams in every region where preparing highly specific stuff still works really well. To summarize, this section is about discovering and exploiting weaknesses. Last thing on the list is going to be statistics, and this is very closely connected to improvement, innovation, and preparation. Because for all these sections, you want to have hard data to really understand what's going on. By tracking your scrim results, for example, you can see how often a particular player is the first one to die, and then, after taking a deeper look into it, you can work on a solution for that problem. Same for the strategy level. By comparing your map and site win rates with the league average, you can find out where you're lacking. And then you can come up with new strats for that site to hopefully improve your win rate. But the field in which having stats really shines is preparation, and more specifically, the map ban aspect. There are not a lot of things in Rainbow that could be considered a numbers game, and I'm not saying that map veto is only a numbers game, but I do feel like this is where having the actual numbers is really important. The map pool of a team just isn't something that changes on a weekly basis, and if your opponents have first banned Villa for the past 4 weeks, that's not an accident. It really tells you that these guys do not want to play Villa, which you can then use in the veto process to get an advantage. Maybe I'm a bit biased in my focus on stats, but I really hate making decisions based on feelings, and I always like being able to support my point of view with actual numbers. Okay, so now we have defined the 5 sections that staff is responsible for. Just to quickly recap, management is about communicating with tournament organizers, other teams, or your org. Improvement is about making the existing strats and processes better. Innovation is coming up with new stuff in order to make the team better. Preparation is about scouting your future opponents and adjusting your game plan in order to abuse their weaknesses. And last but not least, stats, which is about collecting all kinds of stats that can be useful for all the other areas. So how are we splitting up these responsibilities? Let's start with the straightforward stuff. Teams typically have a dedicated manager that takes control of all the outside communication with the exception of scrims. Usually, managers are appointed by your org, and they might not have a lot of experience with Siege, so scheduling scrims is usually done by the coaches themselves. Next on the list are improvement and innovation, and both of these are typically associated with coach work. A dedicated person who watches all the scrims and matches and tries to find out all about the strengths and weaknesses of his team. And once he has found a weakness, he can either work on a solution to improve on the current way of doing things, or he could come up with an entirely new approach to the problem. The thing with the last 2 sections, preparation and stats, is that they require quite a bit of time, and so teams started to employ another member, usually referred to as an analyst, to relieve the coach of some of the workload. And these are the sections that an analyst would typically take over. So he would watch opponents' VODs, collect stats, and then present them to the coach and the rest of the team before the games. To make this model a bit closer to reality though, I would blur the line around at least innovation a bit. Especially because an analyst is watching so many different games, he he's bound to find some nice ideas for strats that could be adapted by the team. So at least the innovation part is probably shared by coach and analyst. I would say that a lot of Pro League teams handle it about how I described it here. But I actually think that this system is a bit outdated nowadays, especially concerning the analyst role. I think that having a dedicated analyst doesn't make that much sense anymore, and that is for two reasons. First, like I said earlier, the importance of specifically preparing for an opponent has gone down a bit. I feel like nowadays people just aren't as predictable as they once were, and this makes it quite risky to make major changes to the way you play. And the second reason is that in order to be a good analyst, you need to be aware of how your team is playing. The things you need to look out for during your opponent prep highly depend on the strengths and weaknesses of your own team. And you get to know about those by watching scrims. But if you're watching scrims anyways and understand the weaknesses of your team, might as well try to fix them. And it's not like having two people watching scrims is wasted effort or anything. Quite the opposite is true actually. 4 eyes see a lot more than 2. But now the problem is that the quote-unquote analyst has a lot on his plate, and I guess this could be solved by just watching every other scrim or so, but I think there is a better way. I think you should have 2 coaches being responsible for everything here. So what I'm saying is that both should watch scrims so they can take care of improvement and innovation, and also have the necessary information for preparation, and then you just split the work on preparation and stats. And obviously it doesn't have to be a 50-50 split, but I do think that doing it like this creates a very important synergistic effect. Because now you always have someone to talk to about whatever you're working on. A lot of the time, the biggest challenge of finding a solution is actually identifying the correct problem. And with this setup, you always have 2 people that are up to date on everything, so you can have an actual discussion on what the problem really is and how you should go about solving it. And I think these discussions are really important when it comes to finding the correct solution. I know that this is the system that G2 currently use, for example, at least regarding the part where there's no clear distinction between coach and analyst anymore, and it's also how we've been handling stuff at Rogue in the past season. And based on that I know that it is actually possible to do all of this. During the second part of Season 10, I prepared for opponents, collected stats, watched all the scrims, and thought about solutions for our mistakes, and all of that took me around 50 to 60 hours a week. So it's possible, but I can't deny that it was getting pretty hard towards the end. Oh, and of course that doesn't mean that Redeemer was just chilling, right? He was watching scrims and trying to find solutions just as I did. And the nice thing about us working together is that both of us kind of have different strengths, so we kind of complemented each other really well. But enough of the personal anecdotes. So this is how I would conceptualize staff work in Rainbow Six. I think that there are mainly 5 different areas of work that need to get done. Traditionally speaking, they were usually divided among 3 people, with a manager taking care of all the management related stuff, a coach who focuses on improvement and innovation, and an analyst who focuses on preparation and statistics. In reality, the lines separating these fields are of course a bit blurred, and I think that this also represents the future, where these lines will become even more blurred and a distinction between coach and analyst won't even be possible anymore. I hope you liked this video, even though it was just a lot of talking without that much connection to actual Rainbow, but I do hope that this at least helped aspiring coaches and analysts to get a better impression of what the job is about. Thanks for watching.